What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I'm going to continue to examine my top 10 greatest fighters of all times. Number 3 is the great Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson is Curtis Anderson's number 1 fighter. And that's a great choice because Ray Robinson was the greatest fighter pound for pound, weight for weight, any weight division, because he fought in all weight divisions up until his attempt at light heavyweight in 1952. You see, in 1938, Ray Robinson fought for the North American Metropolitan Bantamweight Championship title, and he would win. He was born May 3rd, 1921 in Alley, Georgia. He would pass through Detroit, and he would land in Harlem, New York. He died April 12, 1989. He stood 5 foot 11 inches, had a 72.5-inch reach, had a record of 202 total bouts, 173 wins, 109 knockouts, and he was part of the 19 middleweight championship losing streak. You had Ivan the Blade Barkley, Mickey Walker, Jake LaMotta, Ray Robinson. He had a fighter by the name of Gil Turner, who wasn't a champion. He was a welterweight, but he did move up to the middleweight division. But these men were part of the 19 losing streak, and they had middleweight championships in their resume. He fought in 1939 in the featherweight division in the New York and Chicago Golden Gloves. 1940 as a lightweight in the New York Inner City and New York Golden Gloves, as well as Chicago Golden Gloves. Now, Ray Robinson had a record of 85 total bouts as an amateur, 69 knockouts, and 40 knockouts in the very first round. He fought in 1941 against Sammy Aingot, Marty Servo. He fought Sammy Aingot July 21st of 41, Marty Servo September 25th of 41. Defeated them both in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He would take on Robert Villemain for the vacant Pennsylvania middleweight championship title. He took on Fritzy Zivik twice, Jake LaMotta 6 times, Denny Moyer and Phil Moyer, his brother, Wolfie Greaves, Carmen Basilio twice, Gene Farmer 3 times, Paul Pender twice, Terry Downs once, Izzy Genazzo once, Randy Turpin twice, Henry Armstrong in 1943 once, Tommy Bell twice in 1946, Ralph Tiger Jones, George Sugar Costner twice, knocked him out twice in the first round, Artie Levine, California, Jackie Wilson, just to name a few. Now, Ray Robinson was remarkable. When he took on Sammy Aingot, 10 rounds, Philadelphia at Tribe Park, Ray Robinson weighed 136.5 pounds. He had a 72-inch reach and had a record of 20 wins with 17 knockouts. And Ray Robinson was 20 years old. Now, Sammy Aingot was 26 years old. He weighed 136.5 pounds, stood 5 foot 7.5 inches, had a 70-inch reach, and he had a record of 60 wins, 15 losses, 5 draws, and 8 knockouts. Now, the thing with Sammy Aingot, he would become champion when he defeated Davey Day, May 3rd, 1940. It was for the vacant belt, when Lou Ambers was stripped of his title. May 19th, 1941, Lenny Mancini would win, and he deserved an opportunity which Sammy ain't got. But the war would come. Lenny Mancini would never get his chance. Now, Ray Robinson would become the welterweight champion of the world. Marty Servo was signed to meet Ray Robinson August 10th. And he would automatically decide that he didn't want to fulfill that obligation. You see, he faced Rocky Graziano. And Graziano had butchered up his nose. And Ray Robinson had defeated Sammy Engat. He also defeated Marty Servo. So Marty Servo said to hell with it, and he decided to retire. August 10th, 1946. New York Commission had attempted to get an elimination tournament underway because Marty Servo has retired. However, the fighters in the top 6 outpriced themselves and were trying to find ways not to fight Ray Robinson. So the next logical contender will be number 7 ranks, Youngstown, Ohio's Bobby Bell. And that fight would take place December 20th, 1946, New York's Madison Square Garden. Oh. What happened in that fight that night was a thing to behold. My grandfather was at the fight, and he explained that fight to me in detail. He told me how he couldn't wait to get off work. You see, when you went to a fight, it was an event. You had your little rituals and things you would do before and after a fight. It was an event. And my grandfather would go into Madison Square Garden. And of course, he put something on the books. Because everyone knew Ray Robinson was going to win that fight that night. It was something they were hoping for since he turned professional October 4th, 1940. When the bell rang, Tommy Bell would come out, as would Ray Robinson, and both men would jab and move around. And that took place for several rounds. But eventually Ray Robinson would get clipped, and he would go down. And he would land on one knee. And the entire garden would stand up. You couldn't hear a pin drop. Not a rat piss on cotton. And Ray Robinson would eventually get up as he looked over to Harry Wiley Sr. And the connection those two men had. All Harry Wiley Sr. had to do was look at Ray Robinson. And Ray knew what he had to do. He would get up. He would allow the referee to rub the rosin off his gloves. And he would start moving around. Meanwhile, Tommy Bell, who danced over to the neutral corner, felt that he had a win. Understood immediately that he had to try and get Ray Robinson out of there. But Ray Robinson would double up on a jab. He would hold his man around the shoulders, would push him off as the referee was about to separate them. And Ray Robinson would move from side to side, rotate his head in opposite directions of one another. He would eventually clear his head, and he would win the fight and become the 5th welterweight champion who was a black fighter. Harlem would lose their mind. The first champion was the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. The second champion was the Dixie Kid. Then you would have young Jack Thompson, then Henry Armstrong, and a new young phenomenon who embraced Harlem, New York. His name was Sugar Ray Robinson. And he would now become the representative of Harlem, New York. Robinson would gain the title by decision in 15 rounds. Robinson would vacate the title after winning the eliminating tournament. And Johnny Bratton had won a title by decisioning Charlie Fusari, 15 rounds, March 14th, 1951, in Chicago Stadium. Ray Robinson's first title defense was against Jimmy Doyle, who he would kill in the ring with a left hook. Ray Robinson had a premonition after sparring a young man in Pumpkin Lakes. He flattened that sparring partner. The sparring partner was out for about 7.5 minutes. So Ray Robinson, after signing to face Jimmy Doyle, would begin to have a premonition. He would have a premonition that he would kill Jimmy Doyle in the ring. And although many thought that Ray was hallucinating, told him not to worry about that and go on with the fight. And Ray would hit him with a left hook on the side of his head. Jimmy Doyle would fall like a sack of potatoes. Ray would get the news that Joy had died. So his last welterweight title defense would be against Charlie Fusari, Jersey City, New Jersey. Wonderful boxing exhibition that was. But then he would vacate his title to move up to the middleweight class. He wanted to go for Marcel Sedan's middleweight title. Jake LaMotta would have something to say about that. And these two men would meet up February 14th, 1951. It would be better known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And Ray Robinson would knock out Jake LaMotta in 13 rounds in Chicago Stadium. And he would become the brand new middleweight champion of the world. July 10th, 1951, Ray Robinson would lose his middleweight championship title to Randy Turpin on points in 15 rounds in London, England. September 12th, 1951, Robinson would stop Randy Turpin in 10 rounds, and he would re-win his title, New York's Polo Grounds. The referee was Ruby Goldstein. He was about to stop the fight. Harry Wiley Sr. said, "Ruby, do it for me. Give me one more round. Soldier Jones will handle this cut." And Ruby said, "Harry, don't worry, I'll take care of it." He had to go over and talk with Dr. Vincent Nardiato. And after that conversation, Goldstein would wave both men back to the middle of the ring. And Ray Robinson would give a boxing display. He was hungry. He wanted to get that title back to his country. And that he would do. And Randy Turpin would be knocked out. The Polo Grounds against Ray Robinson. Now, Ray Robinson would attempt to face Joey Maxim for the light heavyweight championship belt. New York's Yankee Stadium. He couldn't answer the 14th bell. Heat exhaustion. He would gas out because he overworked himself. He was trying to fight Maxim as though he was fighting a welterweight. He was throwing vicious combinations, moving from side to side. Meanwhile, Joey Maxim was just plotting, taking his time. Ruby Goldstein had to be replaced by Ray Miller of Chicago, who, by the way, was an outstanding, hard-punching lightweight himself. And Ray Robinson would not win the light heavyweight championship title. I had the pleasure of meeting Ray Robinson on 2 separate occasions. At this time, Ray spoke softly. But that was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had. Sitting next to Ray Robinson. And him telling me about certain things that he could remember. Oh, I cherish that moment till this day. But that's not why he's my number 3 greatest fighter. Ray Robinson is my number 3 greatest fighter in all of boxing because of his skill set, because of his heart, because of his determination. He was a 5-time middleweight champion, 1-time welterweight champion, dominated the amateurs, turned professional in 1940, along with the great Ezzy Charles, along with the great Willie Pep, along with the great Jimmy Bivens, along with the great Ike Williams. Shout out to Ray Robinson. He was, indeed, the greatest fighter, pound for pound, of all times. R.I.P. to Kurt Sugar, Curtis Anderson. Ray Robinson is his number 1 greatest fighter of all times. Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Shout out to Sugar Ray Robinson. Pound for pound, no question about it. Vicious left hook. Salute.